Thank you for listening to Open Voice Radio, bringing you voices from the spectrum of human experience. This is Josh Kurz-Burchard. I'm here today with Daniel Meirom, co-creator of the film Camden, Love, Hate. The film features an intimate look at 5 students living in Camden, New Jersey, who also act as filmmakers themselves. Camden has been called the most dangerous city in the United States. Thank you for joining me today, Daniel.
Thank you for having me.
So I was lucky enough to see the rough cut of this film, and it really grabbed me. What was the original vision that you had of this film going into it when you first began, and when did you begin?
It's actually a funny story because we were pitched another idea for another movie about Riverside, New Jersey, and about the ordinance. They had a few years ago, they passed an ordinance limiting the rights of undocumented immigrants from Brazil. And a friend of mine filmed some footage of the demonstration that they had, and we thought it would be a great idea to film a movie about the story in Riverside. So we went to Riverside, we did a few interviews, and then by I guess coincidence, we met this class from Camden and their teacher, and I talked to him a tiny bit, and I was like, wow, like this is an amazing, Camden is an amazing story, and probably a more interesting story than the Riverside, because it has so much history connected to it. So
you said it was a class. So what kind of class was this?
He was doing a class showing he wanted to show his class what is the struggle between two different sides, and just basically a class about democracy and different opinions, and we clicked with him immediately. Our first idea was to maybe do an action movie in Camden. And then the more we talked about it, the more we were like, wow, the city itself has an amazing story. And he connected us with this amazing school called CCYD. And they have this project for students that are struggling with their regular schools, and they come to CCYD. And it's just an amazing place because there's no metal detectors, there's small classes, and it's just an amazing environment for students to learn that doesn't feel like a prison. And that was amazing, and immediately the principal at that time, Dr. Horton, was like, oh, you want to work with our students? Awesome. So we had a class, and we came once a week. And the original idea was to teach film and then film and maybe do a documentary. But the vision was created, I think, from working with the students. We loved the fact that there's so much rich history for that town that's untold. It's basically an untold story of American history.
Right. From my understanding, Camden used to be a thriving city and had the first drive-in movie theater and...
First driving movie theater. It had 7 or 8 regular theaters back in the day. It had RCA. In the beginning of the 20th century until the mid-20th century, was the biggest record manufacturer in the world. That's amazing. They had a very popular recording studio that a lot of famous artists recorded there. And that's something, it's a big piece of American history. It was considered one of the best places for working people in America to live in, because you had RCA, you had Campbell's Soup, you had the shipyard. There's so many big factories in that small city. So people from different backgrounds could find work, and without necessarily a college degree. So you can live an honest life and provide for your family without with pride. You have a good job, and it's not that the history of the city was perfect. There was a lot of problems during the history of the city, but it was a place for people to come and make a life for them and their family.
How did that life that was available to people, you said even with a high school education or maybe vocational education, how did that start to change in Camden? When did it start to change?
I think it's a change that's not only a Camden change, it's a change that happened all over America, especially like urban centers, that it started with having factories in Camden was more expensive than having them in the South. So a lot of factories moved to the South. And
what happened to RCA?
RCA, I guess the demand, RCA got, merged with another company, and slowly there's less and less manufacture in Camden itself. And somewhere in the late 60s or early 70s, the factory, if I'm not mistaken, was shut down. There's a great photo of demonstrators from the late 60s trying, to fight for their wages. And it was like very fast, like in 20 years, but factories just from being in almost like the peak of the city to a decline on steroids. I guess that's the best word for it.
How long did the decline take?
There's different phases for the decline of the city. There's the general one that happened in a lot of other cities of just people, the new American dream of living in the suburbs and just people moving out because it's supposedly a better life. And then you have the factor that factories are closing down. So I think from late 40s to I think late 60s, you started to feel a big change. And for a lot of African Americans, they did not have the opportunities of getting a mortgage as other population had. So there's a situation that suddenly, not only you lost your job, but you can't get a loan to move relocate your family to a place that has better jobs. And one thing that's also important for me to say, even though there's a lot of bad things said about Camden, it's not, there's a lot of good people living there and, that take care of the city and doing a lot of good in it. So I feel the image of, people just, when they think of Camden, immediately it's murder city, it's crime. And yes, all of that is there, but there's also a lot of good people. And I think it's always important just to, point that out, that there's a lot of good people fighting to make it better. And it's not always bad also.
Can you tell us more about the students that you worked with?
Yes. We followed 6 students, and we don't only call them students, I think the title that they deserve is like filmmakers. Because we started in the class not only teaching them film, but also teaching them about the history of Camden. So together, we learned about the city, and together we went outside and interviewed and filmed people and created the questions together. And they filmed a big chunk of the movie, and they were to record the sound with us. And we wrote together the questions. So they asked the questions, and they were engaged in it just as us. And the movie would not be the same if 2 outsiders, not from Camden, come into Camden and interview people. We had the blessed to be coming as insiders because our students, as part of the film, knew everybody. So you get this accessibility that an outsider cannot get, or it takes a long time. You have to be in a place for a few years for people to be that open. So the students are they are part of the subject of the movie, but they're also filmmakers, also part of the creators of the film. So that's a big difference, I think, with other documentaries that they can't, come in, document people. That's great, but our movie is a bit different in that regard. So
how were they? They were chosen because they were at the CCYD, which is the Camden Center for Youth Development?
It wasn't even they were chosen. The principal said, we have a film class. Who wants to be in the film class? Some people came, didn't like it, left. Some people liked it, and they stayed. and they went on. It's a journey that we went together. They we chose them, but they chose us too. So if they didn't like the class, they could, just didn't stay. So
There was one student, Jafar, who plays a big part in the film,
yes,
and he says at one point that Camden is not a negative place, and then he names a number of his family members who have grown up in Camden, and he makes this statement that struck me as a testament to what you already said, which is that Camden is a good place, that there's problems and there's crime and there's drugs and so on, but these are real people in a community that has its own beautiful things about it. What were some of the things that you encountered while making this film that helped you see it as a positive place as well as a...
first of all, the students, because working with students that are interested in something, the same thing that you are, like you get really connected to them, and I'm still in touch with most of them today. So that's the number one. Meeting their friends, their family members, that's another one. And seeing people, working hard to succeed in less than ideal conditions, and trying to make the best out of it in like very hard situations. That's one thing, and seeing that is very inspiring. People that work in Camden, teachers, students, volunteers, people that, no matter what happens, are big believers in the city. The principal, Dr. Horton, she's like she's not the principal anymore. There's a new guy, his name is Felix, that's great too. But Dr. Horton, one of the things she says in the movie, that she believes that Camden, will rise again, And the history of the city, a city cannot be all bad and all negative. First of all, because there's a lot of great people living there, but also it has such an amazing history for such a small place that I think, it's very important for people to have their personal history, to know their personal history, but it's also very important for a community to respect and know their history, and for people surrounding it to know their history. Because one of the things that strikes me is like, that it's almost like an erase, even though you can just Google and find all that stuff. Most people don't do that. And even, people that live in Camden don't know about that history. And the moment they know, there's like a sense of pride. Oh, like film, industry, fashion, food, whatever, it was that was the center of South Jersey. And I think, people, that makes them feel pride about their city. When everybody all the time, all they have to say about Camden is like, the place sucks. In reality, that's not true. And yes, it has, like, we can't ignore that, it has a lot of issues. It has a higher murder rate, like problem with education, problem with poverty, but it doesn't make a place bad. It doesn't make a place with no hope. But I think to change it, it's also very important to know the positive things.
How do you think the self-esteem of the youth of Camden is affected by the reputation that it has, fairly or unfairly, in the city itself and outside of the city?
I think the problem that a lot of young students in Camden have is there's not enough people telling them that you're going to do good. You're equal to anybody else. There's some very amazing educators that do it, but when everybody, surrounding Camden sees Camden in such a negative way, I think it affects students. I think, it's very important for a young kid to hear that he can do whatever he wants to do, with his life. Some will succeed, some will not, but when you don't get that positive feedback, it hurts you. And I think also it's not only that. I think, people talk about PTSD in the army, but I have a few students that I believe, that has not only, not necessarily students from the film, but students that I met in CCYD that had PTSD because, they saw somebody got shot, a best friend of them died, interactions, with the police, with crime, and that will affect you. And nobody really, not a lot of people acknowledge that fact that, if you see somebody getting murdered in front of your eyes, that will affect you. That will, maybe hurt your chances of, and when there's not enough support to help you deal with that, what you just felt, that can hurt you. With that being said, if you ask some of my students, they will tell you also that personal responsibility is also important.
What would you say to people who might want to divert funding from Camden or cut off certain programs, education, etc., because they have an attitude that the population they have to earn it themselves, and and that personal responsibility taken to the extreme where there's people who think that there should be no such thing as public assistance or social services.
I think that's, it's taking one fact of like personal responsibility and put something that's not connected to it at all. Even if somebody needs to take personal responsibilities, he needs the tools to do something with it. So if you tell somebody you need to have personal responsibility, but you don't give him any tools to do something with it, so it's not going to help. So taking out all the assistants and the good people working there and saying, oh, you're going to be okay by yourself. And the thing is, this is the mistake about Camden that a lot of people have. People say, oh, all the funds for other places in Jersey come to fund Camden, but that's not the truth. The truth is that Camden is, in a way, the backyard of New Jersey right now. The reason, like Camden, one of the nicknames that not all the city, but Broadway has, is the Mecca of drugs. And the reason for that is because drug addicts from all over South Jersey, from the nice suburbs, come to Camden to get their drugs. So here's one thing that nobody's giving money. The suburbs don't pay tax, like drug addict tax, to Camden to deal with the drug addicts and the methadone clinics. I'm sure the methadone gets budget, but what is I don't think there's a lot of suburbs that want to have in their suburbs like the methadone clinics. That's not the dream of living in the suburbs. So that's most of them are in Camden. And the sewage factory of South Jersey is in Camden. And nobody is, that's a city is taking that on its own shoulders. So saying that, Camden is only taking money, quotes, from Jersey is not true. Like, you need to give the city money to deal with basically sending to the city a lot of negative stuff that are not, a lot of the drug addicts that are in Camden are not from Camden. So who is giving Camden money to deal with the influx of so many people that's hurting think about like a student that lives in an okay neighborhood, right? Everybody takes care, cleans the house, cleans the block, and then to go home, he has to go through Broadway. But Broadway has so many drug addicts who come from all over the place. And that's what they have to see every day. So that's part of the reason that there's so much crime is because, that's what the city became because of directing it to Camden.
People from outside of the city are coming in and buying drugs and so on, committing crimes, and you're saying Camden is getting an unfair burden?
I think so. I think there is something that, that just it's a think about it. You know, it's not even. Let's not get like immediately to like. I want to try to say to people, don't jump with your personal political opinions to judge the city. Just try to think of it as like a rational place. Like, it's not fair to put on the shoulders of the city so much and to say, oh, but we are, why should we give money? It's not, you're giving money because the city is taking a lot of burden of like stuff that not a lot of other places in South Jersey are dealing with. So I think, there is some kind of a bad rap that's not deserved to the city.
There is some tragedy in the film, and I won't go into what it is because I don't want to ruin the surprise or the effect for those who haven't seen it yet. What kinds of support do you see people in Camden giving each other around a tragic event like maybe a shooting or maybe a overdose or anything else that might happen in a city like Camden? How do you see the people of a community coming around and looking out for each other? Or are there times when they're not so fond of what's going on in their own neighborhood?
It's a tough question. I think people do come to help each other more than people think. I think there is a sense of like, there's a sense of pride. A lot of people, especially people that remember better days in Camden, that they want the city to come back. And I have one of my students that he works with people with disabilities, and most of them not necessarily from Camden, but he will prefer, to help also people with disabilities in Camden. But he feels a sense like, of succeeding in Camden. And there's a great interview in the movie of a business owner on Broadway that says, first of all, I want to do good for me and my family. And I think the focus that's very important, like, that students talk about is the responsibility to be responsible inside your family, to take care of your children, to be there if it's possible. And you can see the struggle of some of the parents in the film to take care of their kid. The precious things you have in your life, that you protect at home, but the second he leaves the doorstep, there's so much negative temptations for him. So, from the day you start going out of the house, you have a parent that's trying his best to protect you. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's harder in some parts of Camden.
Camden Love Hate is near completion, and what do you hope that the audience will find in the movie once it's released?
I hope there's a few levels. Like, I hope that it will help my students have a better life. The students that worked with us with this film, because I think they have some of them have good lives, but maybe a grant to go to college, maybe a better job, maybe anything that can make them they are successful, but even more successful. I wanted to help the school, CCYD. That's a great school, and they had some budget cuts, but they're getting a tiny bit of budget back. But I really want them to people to acknowledge what we acknowledge, that it's a great place, and it's an important institute in Camden. And we're telling a story. This is a story about a city and the young residents of that city. I wanted to bring good, it's not something specific. I don't know, I wanted to at least, not an illusion that it's going to make the city better, but, at least the people that worked on the film. And, it's a love and hate. Somebody asked me, we gave this lecture, and somebody asked me, why Camden love hate, because and one of the filmmakers, one of the students said, because we love it and we hate it. We love, there's so much things to love about it and so much things that annoy you and and you're passionate about. So I want I want it to be better. I want to make some kind of a difference.
Daniel Meirom, co-creator of the film Camden Love Hate. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you, Josh.
This is Open Voice Radio. We look forward to next time. Thank you for listening to Open Voice Radio. We hope you'll join us again soon.